Hansen, Natutemak, TR Wheatley, Nisigasun, Opasquayak Oche. Tawau, welcome to APTN National News. In honor of the 10th anniversary of the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the MasterCard Foundation announced in a press release a $235 million donation for post-secondary education on Tuesday. The money will go towards post-secondary institutions working to improve educational outcomes for Indigenous youth and are engaged in Indigenous communities and offer programs that include Indigenous priorities. A total of $55 million will go to 4 national Indigenous organizations, including $25 million for the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. 10 Indigenous post-secondary institutions will receive $10 million each, including the First Nations University of Canada. 16 mainstream post-secondary institutions will get $5 million each. First Nations University of Canada President Jacqueline Ottman had this to say about her institution's donation.
This is very momentous for First Nations University of Canada to receive $10 million of funding that is essentially unrestricted for us, so we get to dream and plan for the future in relation to sustainability and supporting our students.
The Winnipeg IKEA staff held a survivor flag-raising ceremony to recognize National Day for Truth and Reconciliation later this month. Workers at the store have been dedicating time to learn about the history of Indigenous culture and to educate themselves on residential schools. Julia Ross attended the ceremony and has more.
Here at Winnipeg, I think we are extremely proud that we finally are able to raise the flag and show everyone how we feel.
Edward Budd raised the survivor's flag Tuesday morning during the IKEA staff's ceremony. He says he held his history with him as he raised the flag.
I just thought of my family, my ancestors. My mother, she went to a residential school. She was in Guy Hill, and a lot of painful stories, so I kept them in mind.
Andrea Drylick, IKEA Winnipeg's Communications and Interior Designs Manager, has been an advocate for truth and reconciliation in the store. She's been helping to build programs and action plans for the past 2 years. Leading up to the Survivor Flag ceremony, Drylick says staff took training to learn the history of residential schools, as not all workers had the opportunity to learn Indigenous history in school.
Making sure our coworker base understands the history of Manitoba and the history in our community. At IKEA, one of our visions is to make sure everyone is comfortable here. Our home is your home, and we want to make sure everyone in our community feels welcome.
The flag raising was one of many opportunities that IKEA has organized to bring coworkers together and provide a deeper connection to Indigenous stories.
Hearing our stories of our community, of the pain and the loss, it's extremely impactful both for our coworkers who've been impacted, but those who haven't, just being able to understand what is happening in our community has been really important to us.
I really appreciate the effort that everyone has put into this. And I would say this is a good acknowledgement of residential school history and the people, but I think it's also good for any people that's been oppressed, and I think it's a good thing. I think that's part of why people are here, because we have a lot of people from all over the world and come from very difficult backgrounds.
Julia Ross, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The Hollow Water First Nation is still reeling after 8 residents were stabbed on Thursday morning, resulting in the death of a young woman. A candlelit vigil and walk was held Tuesday by the community school in honor of the victims, survivors, and their families. Media was not allowed to attend the event 160 kilometers northeast of Winnipeg. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew was in the First Nation over the weekend, providing his condolences to the community of roughly 1,000 residents. 18-year-old Marina Samard died after her brother Tyrone Samard, 26, stabbed her and 7 others known to him Thursday morning. All were transported to hospital, where 4 people have since been discharged as of Sunday. Manitoba Shared Health says they expect the rest will be discharged in the coming days. Tyrone died fleeing the community in a collision with an RCMP cruiser. A group of protesters gathered in Sault Ste. Marie to demonstrate against Ontario's Bill 5 and the Government of Canada's Bill C5. The provincial and federal legislation is designed to fast-track mineral exploration and development, but critics say the bills do so at the expense of treaty rights and the environment. APTN's Mike McDonald reports.
People over profit, water over oil!
People over profit, water over oil!
People over profit, water over oil!
The demonstration against Bill 5 and Bill C5 was organized by the Sault Ste. Marie Indigenous Friendship Centre, an unusual action as friendship centres have traditionally been nonpartisan. The executive director of the Sioux Friendship Centre says while she still considers her organization as nonpartisan, it has a duty to advocate on behalf of urban Indigenous people.
Urban Indigenous are a real population of people, and they don't have anybody else to advocate and support them. They don't even get their services from their own First Nation, so they have the Friendship Centre. And we have to come together like this and advocate and support our people.
One of the protesters taking part in the demonstration is Atreo Lewis, who is also part of the Bill 5 encampment at Queen's Park this summer.
I think it's really getting everyone out here and getting engaged with the issue. I'm grateful to be flown out here with the IFC. I think it's great, engaging, it gets people talking, gets people motivated, and I hope to educate more today while I'm here.
Carson Kiosk, a local hunter, says the bills will have a dramatic impact on Indigenous hunting and fishing rights.
These lands are protected by treaties that go back further than my grandparents, and I find it hard to believe that they can do something like this and push this stuff onto these areas.
Other protesters called on First Nations leadership to fight against the bills.
We need to be heard, and something needs to be done about this bill because it's only going to cause more harm to our land and our animals and our rights. So I'm really looking forward to seeing more people come together and protest, and our leaders stand up and use their voice to make sure that they inspire everyone to come together.
We have to stop Bill C5, and we need the support of the Chiefs of Ontario as well as Anishinaabe Nation, as well as our chiefs and councils. We cannot move ahead until we do that.
Around 30 people took part in the demonstration. No word on whether further protests will be organized. Mike McDonald, APTN National News, Sault Ste. Marie.
Since July 11th, the 181 employees of the Rio Tinto Sorel Tracy powder plant have been on an indefinite strike. Some of their demands go beyond wage issues. APTN Stephanie Desev met with an Indigenous employee and his daughters who also want cultural recognition.
The employees of this iron and titanium complex are unhappy with Rio Tinto. Chagabesh Jérôme, who has clocked in to work for the past 29 years, is now on strike. He and his co-workers are asking for a comparable salary with the neighboring factory, which was recently bought by Rio Tinto, the very company they work for. 98% of the employees refuse Rio Tinto's so-called final offer. The negotiations are presently at a standstill.
Dans mon point de vue, je trouve ça un gros manque de respect de ne pas vouloir discuter, de ne pas vouloir négocier, de ne pas vouloir s'asseoir avec nous autres puis parler. Moi, j'ai mes deux filles qui travaillent avec nous ici.
Jérôme is Innu from the community of Washat Makmani Utanam. He would also like Rio Tinto to recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation as a public holiday.
Nos parents, ma mère, mes oncles, mes tantes ont été dans les pensionnats. Puis cette journée-là, Vérité-Réconciliation, elle vient carrément dire, pour faire une réconciliation, il faut avoir la vérité. Puis la vérité, c'est que nos parents ont vécu le génocide culturel, ont vécu cet outil-là de répression, ont vécu l'isolement, ont vécu les sévices sexuels, les abus physiques, tu sais. Fait que ça a brisé nos parents, puis ça les a changés complètement. Ils n'ont pas pu être les parents qu'ils auraient dû être, qu'ils auraient pu devenir.
Jérôme is not the only one who wants to highlight the importance of this day. His daughters, who work with him, believe in it just as much.
Ça n'a pas été en fait assez éduqué à l'école, bien expliqué, donc ça devrait être reconnu comme un férié.
September 30th is as important for Letitia's sister, Maïka.
Saint-Jean-Baptiste, c'est des fêtes, tout le monde en parle, tout le monde le sait, mais pourquoi le 30, c'est pas une journée comme ça?
Force, solidarité, respect!
Many Indigenous workers across the country have similar stories like this father and his daughters, who are fighting to improve their working conditions.
Ben, on est content d'être ici justement, de pouvoir se battre pour nos droits avec notre père en famille.
C'est pour les années à venir qu'on fait ce combat-là. On le fait pour mes enfants puis pour les autres générations.
Stéphanie Desèvres, APTN National News, Sorel-Tracy.
Time for a quick break here. We tell you about a Manitoba mother who started a GoFundMe to help her daughter with a rare medical condition when we return. Chesqua. Pitigwe. A Manitoba mother is trying to raise money to help cover the expenses of her daughter's medical care, a rare genetic disorder called Pura syndrome that affects less than 800 people worldwide. The family was previously receiving funding from Jordan's principal, but that was recently cut off. With more, here's our Dennis Ward.
Learning to walk for Jacob Aurora was no easy feat. At 2.5 years old, she was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder.
Pura syndrome is rare. There's only 2 kids in Manitoba that have Pura syndrome.
Her mother, Elizabeth Siebrecht, says her daughter faces global development delays, such as troubles with feeding, walking, and speaking, and issues with her lungs.
We don't live in Winnipeg, and we have to commute to Winnipeg for her appointments.
Siebrecht says Jacob Aurora's costs average close to $6,000 a month for occupational therapy, physiotherapy, speech and education therapy, along with transportation to their daily appointments with specialists. And up until recently, they were covered.
We were grateful at one point when we were receiving Jordan's principal funding. However, with the changes across Canada due to Jordan's principal funding, we do not have Jordan's principal funding anymore.
At the start of 2025, the federal government made changes to Jordan's principal. As Jacob Aurora and her mother live off reserve, they are no longer covered. Seabrecht credits Jordan's principal for helping her daughters walking and reaching other major milestones.
We've tried some government funding. However, that hasn't worked out for us very well where we live, because I live in the country near Steinbach area.
Now she's turned to GoFundMe to help cover the costs.
I'm hoping to raise funds for transportation so we could commute to the city Monday to Friday for her educational therapy, speech therapy, physiotherapy, and occupational therapy.
Seabrecht knows the odds are against her, as most children with Pura syndrome are unable to talk, but she remains hopeful that with continued therapy, Jacob Aurora will have the chance to talk one day, just like she's now been able to see her daughter walk. This isn't the first time that Seabrecht has had to hold on to hope. 10 years ago, her other daughter, Alexis, who was 11 years old at the time, was anxiously awaiting a live liver donor. Alexis was diagnosed with a rare and sometimes fatal liver disease at the age of 3 months. She received a liver donation from a confidential donor at the time and is now healthy, married, and a mother herself. Dennis Ward, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Some good news for wildfire evacuees in the Northwest Territories came over the weekend as residents in one community were able to return home. After 8 days of being under an evacuation order, the Wati community government announced on social media that it was finally safe for evacuees to return home. Essential workers returned first on September 5th, while the rest of the community re-entered on September 6th. Although the immediate threat has passed, wildfire crews are still on site performing mop-up operations and maintaining fire break perimeters to keep the community safe. We now want to tell you about this week's web poll question. We ask, would bail reform improve community safety? Your options are yes, no, or unsure, and you can go to our website, aptnnews.ca/poll to cast your ballot. An Anishinaabe woman is making waves in Manitoba's legal community. Hear all about the work she's doing right after the break. Cheskwa. Welcome back. Starting on the East Coast, St. John's 18, Charlottetown 20, Kuujjuaq 9, Happy Valley Goose Bay 16, Chibougamau 12, Quebec City 19, North Bay 17, Sault Ste. Marie 17, Big Trout Lake 9, Kapuskasing 15, Churchill 9, Puckatawagan 17, Barons River 16, Gimli 17, North Battleford 18, Swift Current 20, Uranium City 14, Buffalo Narrows 18, moving west, Fort Chipewyan 23, Peace River 28, Edmonton 31, Lethbridge 29, Bella Coola 16, Campbell River 18, Dease Lake 13, Prince Rupert 15, Old Crow 9, Whitehorse 17, Norman Wells 18, Trout Lake 17, Tuktoyaktuk 9, Fort McPherson 7, Cambridge Bay 8, Chesterfield also 8, Arctic Bay 0, Igloolik 3. The Manitoba Bar Association has welcomed its new president, and for the first time, an Anishinaabe woman will hold the role. Stacy Soldier from the Swan Lake First Nation in Manitoba has been named as the president of the association that represents 1,600 legal professionals in Manitoba. Soldier was called to the Manitoba Bar in 2008. Stacy, congrats and thanks for joining us. What does this mean to you to be the new president of the Manitoba Bar Association?
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here to speak with you, and it is an absolute honor to represent the Manitoba Bar Association. The Bar Association is a branch of the Canadian Bar Association, so we represent over 1,600 lawyers, judges, notaries, law professors, and law students across Manitoba. And being the first Indigenous woman, an Anishinaabe woman from Swan Lake First Nation, makes me immensely proud. I'm proud to represent my community, and I'm proud to represent the legal profession.
Absolutely. You know, this stays in line with that. What do you think it means for Indigenous people to have an Anishinaabe woman in the role?
Well, one of the things in particularly Anishinaabe women who are interested, or any Indigenous women who are interested in going to law school. I know when I was thinking about applying, I really didn't talk about it to anyone because we unfortunately go through with this imposter syndrome of thinking that we don't belong. And I was already telling myself I didn't belong. I didn't want to hear it from other people. But now, looking back, I wish I had somebody that encouraged me. I wish I was able to speak up and reach out to people for that mentorship even earlier on. And I will say to young Indigenous people that there's a seat waiting for you at tables you can't even imagine. Doors are opening that you haven't even started to knock on yet. And you belong in these rooms. You belong at these tables. And if you are interested in going to law school, reach out to the Faculty of Law at University of Manitoba. There is an excellent Indigenous director of who does great work in terms of community outreach, and he'll put you in touch with any lawyer in the community. There's lots of events that they hold, including one they call See Yourself Here. So it's a night to come down to the law school with other students who are interested in going to law school.
Great words of advice there. You know, you were called to the bar in Manitoba in 2008. What made you want to pursue a career in law?
I'm not sure. I think I was always sort of interested in it, but again, having that sense of, do I even belong there? Because it was a profession where I didn't know anybody. I didn't know lawyers. I didn't know judges. I didn't really see Indigenous lawyers besides the late Murray Sinclair and a couple of other Indigenous lawyers who were in the community. And it seemed like such a hard thing to even try. But I wrote the LSAT, I made an application to the law school, and I got in. And of course I had talked to my parents about it, and they knew that I was applying for it. But their reaction always just sort of amazed me because they were they had the attitude of, well, of course you wanted to apply, and of course you're going. There's no question about it. So to have that support from my own family, who believed in me before I probably even believed in myself, was something so important and so special.
Absolutely. You know, you're also a past president rather of the Elizabeth Fry Society of Manitoba. What effects do you think the justice system has on Indigenous women in the province?
Well, I can say that I believe that the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry has things in it that probably could have been written about the justice system last week or last month. We still have a long way to go to realize the goals that Murray Sinclair and the late Justice Elvin Hamilton had in terms of making the justice system a fair, equitable place for Indigenous people. Because at this point in time, and what's gone on in Canadian history, is that the justice system isn't something that's built for Indigenous people. The ideas have been foreign, the ideas of punishment, the ideas of restoring community harmony are not in line with Indigenous values. And so it's going to take work, and there has been work on it by the Chief Justices of Manitoba, who are always interested in learning, always interested in making the system better. So we do have open ears of the people who make these decisions for the justice system, who are listening to Indigenous communities and finding out and hearing their stories and finding out what works best for those communities.
You just touched on this a little bit, but are there issues that you hope to advocate for in your new role as president of the MBA?
Well, one of the main things that I do want to focus on is respect for the rule of law. We are hearing and seeing challenges where people are concerned about increasingly autocratic regimes attacking institutions, attacking the media and the courts, and are concerned with this regression of democratic norms and respect for the systems that we rely on. Now, in Canada, it's not perfect. We still have issues like access to timely court dates, access in rural areas and rural communities of having lawyers and representation in those areas, as well as a sense that the law isn't made for certain people. And so I really do believe that we have to, as a law profession, be in the forefront of protecting the rule of law, of speaking out and having these conversations. Not only that, the importance of diversity within our profession is really, really important. I want to make it clear that making space for diverse people in the profession of law is really important. As lawyers, we have an inherent sense of fairness and of common sense, and having lawyers who bring a diverse identity and diverse views to the profession only strengthens it.
Well, Stacey, it sounds like you're off to a great start. Thank you and congratulations, and thanks for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all the time we have for your daytime newscast this Wednesday. For more news, join us again at 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm TR Wheatley. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. From all of us at APTN, Egasi, Gitam, Kawapamitana.